What's up, you guys? Happy 4th of July, or happy Independence Day for those of you who aren't in the States. So last video, we just kind of kept it real with you guys and said we got too much stuff going on here, so we're trying to get rid of some stuff. So honestly, I think today we may just turn over here on the convertible and try to polish it off and just get everything done so we can text Eric, tell him to come check it out, see if he thinks it's good to go or good enough for him. Because right now there's a couple things that it needs that I don't exactly have on hand. That being new pads and new rotors on all four corners. These are all beat. I've swapped out almost all sets that I have. It's just, they're too old, they don't match. The fuel injectors, this thing actually has phase 1 fuel injectors. While they all 6 do actually work and test fine, we don't exactly know of their entire function. They could drip just a little bit, or the atomization could be off. All that's going to do is contaminate the oil and cause detonation in the cylinder and potentially melt your piston, so we don't want that. We don't exactly have a set on hand of NAs. That's probably the biggest deal, but honestly these 3 things together make the car pretty much not drivable. And that third thing is the carrier bearing is non-existent. This thing at low speeds, when you rev, shakes so bad, it's pretty violent. We've got a couple things to put aside, but we're just going to check over the rest of the car in its entirety and also grab our convertible top in the back so we can get the whole package dealer here ready for him, and hopefully we can get a green light and he'll pick it up and we can start moving forward on repairing the rear damage here on my slick top. For those of you who don't know, this is my 92 slick top. This is my pride and joy. I've had this thing probably about 10 years now. We did a 2-tone red and black interior, all OEM. But the downside, I bought this thing with a rebuilt title 10 years ago. 1,200 bucks, mind you. Got a pretty good deal on this thing, and although anyone else would probably scrap it or just track it, here I am wanting to fix it. And if you guys can't tell already, we have some damage to the rear. Those frame rails should not look like that. That's what they should look like. So pretty much for trade on work, Eric has a couple Z's, and he doesn't have a 93, and he doesn't have a convertible. So now that we're finally working all the kinks out, hopefully we'll think it's good to go and come pick it up. Start draining her off. Thankfully I figured out a good way to efficiently keep the water out of this thing. So the last time that we drove this thing, we actually had kind of like a fire. We had smoke coming from somewhere. It was coming up through the trans tunnel, and honestly the only thing down here that it could have been that I was suspecting was the clutch line itself. Currently it's actually not touching anything. There's nothing touching the exhaust for that matter. But man, does that underbody not look good still. What we found is we actually have a loose power terminal. I tightened it up with my finger, but we're actually just going to tighten it up the rest of the way. Cover that back up. Yeah, honestly, the only solution I think we have here is we're going to go grab some fuel. We're going to start this thing up, let it idle for a little bit. We're going to try to replicate what was going on. It started to smell before we drove off, so in theory it should do it again. Checked over all of our hot points and it's just not contacting anything, so I'm just kind of in left field right now. We've got the can, let's go get the goods. Perks of being in a small town.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna need some more. I just hope we'll be able to figure this out before we use all this gas. We actually just put some windshield washer fluid in there because we didn't have any. That should get rid of one dash light. Let's fire it up. I wonder if this thing's gonna crank over and fire up faster now that that starter power wire's on. This thing always like hiccups and takes forever to start for some reason. Definitely better. Last thing we want to do is launch off these bricks up here. Oh, I didn't even know there was a light for the top. That's cool. Why is our washer fluid light still on, dang it? Let's let this thing idle out and let's see how it feels or smells. It's getting even darker. Now it's sprinkling, that's why we got it all tarped up. Hopefully this rain doesn't come through and mess up our day again. It's rained for like 3 days straight. So far it's idling pretty solid. We're gonna send some stuff over to Eric and just let this thing keep idling out, and hopefully we don't smell anything, but if we do, we'll be sure to examine it. Well, we let it run about 10 or 15 minutes, definitely long enough for it to get hot enough that if it was going to melt or burn anything that it potentially was burning, it definitely would have did it. Although I'm a little confused at what it could have been, I think we'll be fine. So for now, I think we're completely done with this car, and we're just waiting to hear back from Eric. Now, if we're done with that car, I think it's probably a good move that we check on the slick tops engine so we can get it ready to drop here in our DN1. I think we're just gonna drop the rear on the ground. We're gonna start it, let it idle, and feed some old coolant through it so that way we can time it and see if we can make it run good. It ticked really bad when we started it up because it was so dry of oil. It worried me a little bit. Safe to say I don't feel 100% in the clear yet, but we're almost there. Oh, this bay looks nice. Totally forgot, we still don't have a boost controller on this thing. The car's not registered, so I don't really have any high hopes of getting this, you know, driving. We just want to idle it out, get it timed, and get it right. Let's hook up our timing lights so we have this all prepared and ready to go. So you'll remove cylinder 1 coil pack. So you can put another coil pack or just a spark plug wire in line. So you can use this as your lead to time on your crank pulley. You can use the black timing loop up here on your PTU, but I have much better results using this. It's much more guaranteed. We're just going to pull the whole coil pack. Now you take your spark plug wire, fish it down there about where you can get it started. It's kind of annoying because you can't really reach down there. And I just take a socket, push on the plug wire, seat it down. Now plug your connection into this. Then we're going to hook our timing light up. To hook your timing light up, you'll put one of these on each terminal, which appears we actually have to put both of our actual cables on. And then this is your induction pickup. You see this arrow right here. You want this to follow the flow of electricity or current. So you're going to point that down towards the cylinder. And we use this just because it's like a guaranteed thing. It's not a little dinky wire that can get a confusing reading. Make sure you have all this in to begin with and keep your fingers away from it if you have to cut a 90 degree like I did. I couldn't find any straight plug wires, so I had to make it do. This will shock the crap out of you. Ask me how I know. Hook the rest of this up. Oh, I just remembered we got to put an ECU in here. It's going to be tough seeing down here to see our timing light or timing mark, because I don't know if you guys really can even see it, but that little white mark is what we're going to be looking at. Yikes. Maybe this is better to do with your shroud off, and then you can put the shroud on after it's timed. So make sure your timing light is set to 0 so it's not advanced, so it'll give you an accurate reading. Now let's try to fire this thing up. Make sure you're in neutral. We'll see if this thing kicks on. Yeah, we need the second jump pack for sure. Much better. Okay, fired it back up and it quit. So let's just idle it out and see where it goes. You can hear how tappy it is right now. See if all that valve train noise clears up and we'll let it bleed. Let's pull this off and let's check and see what our timing reads. Currently running about 35 degrees. See if we can turn that down, and we have plenty of adjustment to go to the right to be able to tune that down to 15. Twin turbos are always 15 degrees before top dead center. For NAs, 90 to 95 is 15 degrees, but if you have a 96 NA, you actually run 10 degrees before top dead center. So just keep that in mind. And I actually have a full video itself on how to time your car and adjust your timing or set it via my Z32 diagnostic video, so tag that here if we can. So after idling it for a minute, we have came to the conclusion that neither one of these two cylinder injectors are firing. I'm not hearing any ticks through the injector, so right now what we're about to do is try to apply 12 volts directly and see if it clicks. And sure enough, like I told you guys not to touch that, I was leaned over right here, accidentally touched that thing and jolted me right off the car. Still didn't learn. All you got to do is just hook up 2 connections, which I use these alligator clips from Harbor Freight, and hook them up to a 12-volt source. When you touch it, it should click. I guess maybe we should turn this on, considering the battery might not be charged. Okay, so it's clicking. Means it's working. At least presumably, I'm not hearing that click whatsoever once the engine is actually running. So we're on the right track. So we're not getting any voltage to these back 2 injectors right here, no matter where we've tested. So now while we have each of these plugged in, we can actually plug in another crank angle sensor over here, or you can remove the one you have. Now, as you spin it, it should tick for each injector. So I don't have much, so I'm just going to mark one side with my sweat here, which is here on the top. So we're going to spin this and see how many times it clicks as it spins once. Well, it appears it fires 6 times on one full rotation, so that shouldn't be a problem. However, I'm still not getting voltage to my actual connector. Now the next step is to check our diagram in the factory service manual, and we need to check the pin out in between this connector and down here in the floorboard. So basically, you're going to test with what pin here goes to the injector. You're going to test that between the other side, see if you have continuity, and if you don't, then you're going to be checking for breaks, or you're going to run a whole new wire in its place. Really hoping that's not what we have to do, but when the car was running, we actually seen it on the timing light that it got within 5 degrees of 15, so it was at 20 degrees. In theory, even running on 4 cylinders, I should be able to time this, get it good to go, then we know it's good, we can swap it over in the DN1. I don't need to put extensive like testing into it, but as long as we know that it runs and everything's good engine wise, we can still use the other harness that's in the car, so thankfully we're not going to have any issues there. Car ran perfect before. Good news, we were actually able to time it correctly, and we got it to 15 degrees, give or take 1. Hey, Gabby's home from work. But we actually are going to show you guys how to test in between, say, your harness and your ECU connector, so you kind of know how to test and to see if you have like a broken wire, wiring harness / injector plug. So basically, you're going to be reading off this left plug with your tab facing down. So you're going to put your multimeter on continuity, which is pretty much just going to make a noise whenever you touch 2 things together if it shares the same circuit, so that way you'll be able to audibly hear that there's no break in the line. Hi, Gabby. So let's take the red positive terminal, place it inside the connector like so. Make sure you have all your power off and no battery hooked up when you're doing this too. You don't want to have any voltage being supplied to your ECU when you unplug it. However, you don't exactly have to unplug it if you know what you're looking for, because you can actually look at the back of your ECU connector and probe in instead of unplugging it and checking. Here in the factory service manual, you actually have a guide on your trouble diagnosis for your fuel injector circuits. So this is something very useful and helpful when you're working on your Z. So we're on the very front cylinder, which cylinder 1 is on the far side, so this would be cylinder 2 over here. So as we look in the factory service manual, it says to check between here and there, but number 2 cylinder is actually pin out 110. So if you look up here from the very top end, it's the second one down. So just by guessing, we can put it on one side. Yep, just a pure guess. We only know that because it's the opposing side from up here. This is actually your number 1 injector, so they all go caddy corner or diagonal. So I know that this top one is not this big wire, instead it's this right here, so that means I know that it zigzags over. So basically it'll be here to here. As you hear, we have continuity, that one worked. So I had to give you an example of one that actually works, considering we're fighting 2 that aren't working. So now we know we can at least check our other wiring harness before all said and done. But since this thing is timed, we've had fluids run through it, it actually sounds way better, even though it's down on power because it's on 4 cylinders, which idles great. I'm very surprised. I think we're good to start tearing this all back out, or technically go to prepping this chassis so we can drop all this in. And that means one step closer to clearing up some funds and starting to do more exciting stuff, like some engine swaps. I see a lot of you guys commenting on our latest video talking about engine swaps and this and that. Trust me, we want to be there. We just need the money to do it. So we're at a step in the right direction. Dana, what are you doing? So we just cleaned everything up, got it pretty much where we can shut the car up, since now we know our next thing that we can do on here is to pull everything out now that we have the green light, because we actually just did a little bit of research. The big thing that had me really hesitant from putting it in the 95 DN1 is actually the wiring harness. So earlier style cars were 8-bit. The 95, I think 93 and up, at least 94 and up NAs were 16-bit, and 95 plus TTs are 16-bit. I was afraid and under the impression that the ECU connector is totally different than the 8-bit ECU connector. Turns out it just runs on a different operating system, and it cannot be modified like the 8-bit. But the plug is still the same, thankfully, because I was afraid that it wasn't. But I was actually confusing this all with the 96, which is OBD2, and actually does have a different ECU connector down here in the footwell. It appears this one's all held in with hardware and whatnot, so we can't just yank it out. We do know we're in business when it comes to swapping this thing. So now tomorrow we're going to come out here bright and early, and we're going to start to work on this thing so that way we can get the rest of the AC out, clean it up, get it presentable, get it converted back to stock, at least as stock as possible, and get this thing prepared for the power plant to be dropped in. There's really not a whole lot more for us to do today. We did talk to Eric about this. He's actually going to redo the brake system on it, so we don't have to worry about those. With the carrier bearing being included, that literally just leaves it to new style fuel injectors. Not entirely a must. It can be used for the time being, but it's really a high recommendation in the near future for this car. As far as we know for right now, we're actually completely done with this car. We have no reason to work on it whatsoever anymore. And honestly, if anything, if we ever see this car again in our future videos, it's purely going to be us driving it around town to get this and that. We're no longer wrenching on it. We are DUN done. I'm over it. Now we can focus on our other projects, get the ball rolling, get our yard cleaned up, and let's start making some progress. So I'm glad today we at least sorted out that we know our engine's good, it's ready to drop in. Our ECU and wiring issue is all figured out. At least we know this wiring harness needs repaired, but our other wiring harness that's already in the car that thankfully we don't have to remove because the AC core is in the way, and I don't want to just undo all that, take the dash and stuff out, at least half of it. Should make it a pretty straightforward, pretty quick and easy swap, so I'm very happy for that. No more vert content unless he comes to pick it up or we drop it off, vice versa. Now you guys can be expecting us to hop in and getting our DN1 finished up, getting our engine in it. We may not show the full engine dropping process. We may just do a little snap, make it happen, because, you know, we've already showed you guys enough. At least we show you guys all the time, I should say. So thankfully everything's starting to come together now, and we can finally start getting our projects moving and start turning some of these cars and thinning the herd, because we really need to, let's be honest. But since it's the 4th of July, we're actually about to head over and have a cookout, start watching some fireworks over the next town over. So we're going to wrap up the video here. Thankfully, we know exactly what we're doing next video, and we can start busting out some content and getting some stuff done. Thank you guys for watching, and if you guys liked the video, please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe below, as it really helps out the channel, bumps us up in the algorithm, and helps the channel get out there and helps us grow. Thank you guys so much, and until next time, peace.